when there are question times and we ask you to unmute, but welcome everybody. This is the second Wellness Wednesday session that we're running. I'm Dori Cabillo, for anyone who doesn't know me, from Nexus Psychology. We had great feedback about last week's session, and we're really excited about the one today. Today's session will be about mindful thoughts, and we welcome you to put your Zoom on speaker view if you want to focus on the person speaking, and we will be starting off with Annette Marlow, who'll take us through some mindfulness specifically focused on thoughts. And then Amelia Twiss, psychologist at Nexus, will be taking us through some tips on to help us through this time, specifically focusing on mindful thoughts. And there'll be a bit of a presentation there. Welcome, Luke. Welcome, Dylan. Welcome, Katie. So again, we're recording the session, but at the end we'll stop the recording. We will put, see anyone can unmute themselves. We very much welcome a bit of a conversation or any questions about the session that may have come up for you. We had a great discussion last week. And again, for anyone who's come on late, we are going to introduce Annette Marlow, who will be doing a mindful meditation. And then she will be followed by psychologist Amelia Twiss, who will take us through some tips. Okay, Annette, I'll hand it over to you. I'm going to mute myself and see how we go.
Thanks, Dori. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to those who have regularly been attending these sessions. Well done for showing up again. And welcome to anyone that is new to these sessions. We've been running these almost the entire time that we've been experiencing COVID. So it's an ongoing offer from Nexus Psychology. We hope that you will get something out of today. And as Dori said, today we're going to begin with a mindful meditation on thoughts. And I think before we get started, I wanted to explain to you that the first thing we need to acknowledge is that our human minds are absolutely brilliant, and we've all been gifted with these incredible minds that allow us to do so many positive things with. We are able to think, we're able to analyse, we invent things, we can process things, we are able to learn and create, and the list goes on. And but however brilliant our minds are, they can also play tricks on us, and they can play tricks on our emotional and mental well-being. For example, when your mind gets stuck in a cycle of overthinking or excessive thinking or negative thinking or ruminating over something, you can really easily fall prey to poor mental health. And so the purpose of this mindful meditation practice is not to stop your incredible mind from thinking and become a zombie, but rather to develop a deeper awareness of what your mind thinks about and where your mind spends most of its time. So when we become aware of our thoughts and recognize the type of thoughts we're having, perhaps we even can give those thoughts a label, it can really help sharpen your ability to unhook yourself from thoughts that are perhaps not so supportive to your well-being. So with practice and over time, we gain we develop a greater ability to control where we rest our attention. And particularly like in a time like now, there is just so much uncertainty on many levels that our mind can really easily become caught up in a barrage of unpleasant thinking or fear, worry, causing us to feel even more anxious or more vulnerable. So in this meditation, I invite you to observe any thoughts that come into your awareness. And I want you to observe those thoughts like an observable event, in the same way that you observe sounds or your breath or your body, as we've done in previous meditations. So when you observe a thought, and you may not, and it's okay if you don't, but if you do observe a thought, see if you can do it without judging it or analysing it. Perhaps first identify it as, oh, there's a thought, and maybe you can even go further and say, well, what type of thought is this? So for example, you may notice that you're having a thought about someone you're concerned about. So you might go, oh, there's a thought about someone I'm concerned about. I'm going to call that worry. That's a worrisome thought. Or you might notice the thought is negative, and so you can label it in your mind's eye, oh, here's a negative thought. Or it could be a thought about something to do. There's a to-do list thought. Or it might be fantasizing. Here I go, fantasizing again. So when you do notice what your thought is, perhaps give it a label and then simply allow it to pass by, bringing your awareness back onto your breath or whatever you want to anchor your awareness on until the next thought comes past. So most importantly, before we begin, I want you to keep in mind that there is no failure in any of these mindfulness practices. It's only an opportunity to grow and to get to know ourselves. So even if you don't notice anything today, just try and embrace this moment where you can practice following your breath, where you've got a couple of moments to relax and approach it with a calm, compassionate, and maybe even a little bit of a lightheartedness today. So let's begin. I invite you to just make sure there's as little distractions around you as you can control, and then just take a moment to purposefully take a few rounds of purposeful breaths to feel yourself settling. So I like to begin by taking a deep breath in, maybe even a big sigh out, and almost like you're feeling a wave of relaxation come over you. And again, deep breath in. And one more. And just begin to settle into your own natural breathing pattern. Feeling your sit bones grounding into the chair beneath you. Perhaps feeling your feet on the floor. Your shoulders are softening down. Perhaps you can relax your jaw a little more, your mouth. Soften your tongue and lips. And if you're comfortable, just closing down your eyes. Relaxed, letting go, awake, attentive. And then if you can gently bring a subtle awareness to your breath, and beginning to follow the in-breath and the out-breath. Noticing the movement as the breath enters your nostrils and as it leaves your nostrils. Or perhaps you'd rather feel the rise and fall of your belly. Simply curiously observing each cycle of breath. Maybe even enjoying the sensation of breathing. You'll notice that from time to time your mind begins to wander off into thoughts, anticipations of the future, worries, memories, whatever it is. Remember, that is the nature of our thinking mind. When you do notice that your attention is no longer following your breath, just intentionally, gently trying to escort it back to observing and following each breath. From the beginning of the breath, the middle of the breath, to the end of the cycle of each breath. Anchoring yourself back to presence over and over. And as you maintain awareness on your breathing, see if it's possible now to expand your field of awareness so it includes sounds, listening, receptive to whatever enters your consciousness. No need to judge the sounds or analyse them, just simply listening. Aware of sitting in stillness, aware of sounds, aware of space between sounds, aware of silence, just listening. And again, now expanding your field of awareness, this time to observe thoughts. Rather than following each individual thought or getting involved in the content of the thought, simply see each thought as it arises as just that, an observable thought, in the same way you just observed sounds and your breath. Of course, your thought could be about anything, past, future, feelings, thoughts about sleep, thoughts about time, thoughts about anything. Just observing them, perhaps giving them a label, and then allowing them to pass by. Noticing, of course, that from moment to moment, new thoughts will come and they'll also go. And for the rest of the time, if you can allow yourself to just be fully aware of whatever arises. If thoughts arise, allow them. If sounds arise, allow them. Or if it's the breath that's predominant, then just be with your breath. From moment to moment, sitting in stillness, looking for nothing, present with it all just as it unfolds. And now, as we come towards the end of this mindful meditation, just taking a moment to reflect on what you perhaps observed. And give yourself a congratulations for allowing yourself this time to really nourish your well-being and care for your mind. So just taking your time to slowly come back into the room, wiggling your fingers, your toes, perhaps standing up and taking a stretch overhead, moving whatever feels good. And in a moment, it will be a pleasure to hand you over to Amelia Twiss, one of our psychologists here at Nexus, who will talk to you further about thoughts and perhaps some tips on how to manage them. So I invite you to stay if you can, and we'll have some time at the end if you want to ask me any questions. I'll hand you over. Thanks, Amelia.
Thanks, Annette. Lovely practice today. Thank you. So Dori is just going to share with you a little presentation so that you have something to look at while I'm talking. Beautiful. Thanks, Dori. And today we're going to be talking about mindful thoughts. Last week we looked at understanding our emotions, especially in the context of the lockdown that's going on in Victoria. And today we're going to take a bit of a deeper dive into the concept of our mindful thoughts. So when people are practicing mindfulness or meditation, they often say to us, "Oh, I can't stop my thoughts." And being mindful of your thoughts, or practicing mindfulness, of course, isn't about stopping your thoughts. The point is to notice your thoughts, and as we covered off last week, to leave your judgment at home. When talking about our thoughts, it's sometimes helpful to imagine a little voice in your head. And as you reflect on the idea of having a little voice in your head, I wonder if you can get a picture in your mind of maybe what that voice looks like. Does it have a personality or a name? What sort of energy does the little voice in your head have? And Dori, can you show us the examples? Maybe the little voice in your head looks something like this. Oh, I think you don't have it in presentation mode. Just one moment, please, everybody. All right, yes. So perhaps your little voice in your head looks something like the picture in the middle. Or maybe it looks a bit like the image on the side. Or maybe it looks a little bit like this third image. So the point of mindfulness is really to get in touch with that part of you who is aware that there might be a little voice in your head. Okay, so flipping to the next slide, please, Dori. Step one in being mindful about your thoughts is noticing your thoughts. It's a bit tricky sometimes doing dual control of the presentation. Thank you, Dori. Noticing your thoughts with curiosity. So the way that we think affects the way that we feel, and how we interpret things is often influenced by our past experiences. So what we mean by that is our automatic thoughts aren't always accurate. And if you remember from last week, our brains are very quick to jump to conclusions. So practicing mindfulness can help you realize what happened as you experienced a feeling or you had a thought. And choosing how to interpret situations is a skill that you can learn. So you can practice being mindful about your thoughts through developing a regular mindfulness practice like the one we did today. Or if you flip to the next slide, please, Dori. You could use a thought monitoring record like this. So this is a way of noting down what was happening, what you felt, and what you thought. And it's a really great way to help you identify some of those automatic processes that might be going on in the way that you're interpreting your experience. So this is quite a traditional thought monitoring worksheet that your psychologist might share with you. And of course, today, a lot of people are using some pretty funky apps to do the same thing. And if any of you are already using an app, or maybe Dori or Annette, you know of some cool apps that people are using, maybe just type it into the chat box so other people can see what you're using. Some of the popular ones that I've heard of are Mood Kit, iCBT, and Mindshift. Obviously, there's lots of different ones, and certain people like certain apps better than others. My preference is actually to stay away from apps, as I think the less time we spend on our phones, the better. But of course, some people really love just having this really simple way of recording how they're going in their pocket. So you could maybe even work with your psychologist through the EAP to figure out what sort of approach might work well for you. So we all have very quick and automatic thoughts that just pop into our minds, and these automatic thoughts are often based on our assumptions and past experiences. And they're often very believable, but in fact, they can be inaccurate. So what I'm really saying here is that our thoughts are not necessarily facts. So flipping to the next slide, Dori. What do you do with your thoughts? And on to the next one, please. Thanks. Now that you're becoming skilled at noticing your thoughts, it's up to you to decide what to do with them. So in a sense, you're creating your own fact-checking or thought-checking system. So checking in whether you believe a certain thought 100%, or maybe you don't believe it at all. So I'll now talk about a couple of ways to do this. The first one is perspective taking. So Dori, if you can take us to the perspective slide. So I'm going to talk through an example here of how a certain situation might be viewed from different perspectives. So the first perspective here, our country will again and soon be open for business, very soon, a lot sooner than 3 or 4 months that somebody was suggesting. We cannot let the cure be worse than the problem itself. So there's one perspective. Now let's look at another one. If we all do the right thing, we'll get through this. Those doing the wrong thing will cop a fine from police, because the only way to beat this deadly virus is if we all follow the rules. And then finally, the worst case scenario is simply intolerable. It would represent the greatest loss of lives in our country's history. I will not take that chance. The government will do all it can to protect you. None of us can do this alone. So a good starting point for thinking about perspective taking is noticing what you feel as you look at a situation from different perspectives. And as we talk through those 3 perspectives there, you might have noticed in yourself certain reactions or thoughts or feelings. You might have been able to guess who it was that made those statements, and notice how you feel about a certain perspective and whether one might serve you better than others. And remember, you get to choose your perspective. So we'll now move on, Dori, to the next slide, thanks. And we're going to talk about interpretation. So another way of looking at what we do with our thoughts is to think about how we interpret events that happen. And we'll work through a simple example to illustrate this point. So here we have an event, which is stage 4 lockdown for 6 weeks. And one interpretation might be, oh, well, it's only 6 weeks and things will be better for everyone at the end of it. I can do it. And then notice the feelings or the emotions and body sensations that might follow that. Feeling confident, committed, maybe a little bit courageous. If we look at another interpretation, so stage 4 lockdown for 6 weeks. Oh, there's no way I can get through this. And the feelings? Distressed, fearful, and anxious. So notice the difference in how you might feel depending on the way that you interpret an event. So today we've discussed a few ways to be more mindful with your thoughts. Step 1 was to practice noticing your thoughts with curiosity. And step 2 was to notice what you do with your thoughts when you become aware of them. Hopefully the tips that we've shared today will help you to start feeling a sense of control and creativity about what's going on with your thoughts and those little voices inside your head. And learning more about our own cognitive biases or ways of interpreting is a great starting point for becoming more skillful with your feelings and emotions. As Annette says, our minds are quite brilliant, so learning how to work with them will hopefully lead you to a greater sense of freedom about what's happening with those little voices in your head. So that's the end of my presentation, and we will now just stick around for a few minutes. If there are any questions or comments, you can feel free to write your comments in the chat box or unmute yourself if there's a question that you want to ask.
Thank you, Amelia and Annette. I found the mindfulness very relaxing and the tips really good. I think it very much is. You can have the same event and have totally different interpretations. Thank you for reminding us that thoughts are not facts as well. I'm going to pause the recording.